Admiral Corvin Thale stood before the holographic display of the Milky Way, his forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the pathetic blue that had dared to reject the Zeltharian Empire's generous offer of subjugation. The bridge of the Sovereign Death hummed with activity as his officers prepared the greatest war fleet in galactic history for what would surely be the shortest conquest on record. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, her voice carrying the metallic undertone common to their species. "The Earth creatures have transmitted another message." Thale's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Put it through." The hologram shifted to display a human female, her pale skin flushed with what Thale recognized as their species' primitive emotional response system. She wore the uniform of their so-called United Nations Defense Force, though the title was laughable given their complete lack of interstellar presence. "This is Secretary General Maria Santos," the human began, her voice steady despite the obvious fear in her eyes. "We have received your ultimatum, and our answer remains unchanged. Humanity will not surrender. We will not bow to your empire. If you want our world, you will have to take it." Thale's laughter echoed through the bridge, joined by the chittering of his crew. "Remarkable," he said, gesturing to the display. "Look at this creature. They have not even achieved faster-than-light travel, and yet they speak of resistance. Their most advanced weapons are primitive nuclear devices that would barely scratch our hull plating." His tactical officer, Commander ZYX, leaned forward. "Admiral, our intelligence reports indicate they possess fewer than 12,000 military spacecraft, most of which are confined to their inner solar system. Our advanced scouts counted exactly 0 interstellar vessels. They are, by every metric, a planetary civilization. And yet," Thale mused, studying the human's defiant expression, "they refuse to surrender. Do they not understand what we are? We have conquered civilizations that span multiple star systems. We have turned entire species into agricultural stock. The Centauri Federation lasted 3 days against us. The vegan collective surrendered after witnessing the destruction of a single world. Perhaps," suggested the science officer, "their primitive brains cannot process the scale of their defeat. Shall we demonstrate by destroying one of their outer colonies?" Thale considered this, then shook his head. "No, let them keep their delusions a little longer. It will make their eventual capitulation all the more satisfying." He turned to his fleet coordinator. "Signal the Armada. We advance in formation. I want them to see us coming. I want them to count our ships and understand the futility of their position. The Sovereign Death was a monument to Zeltharian engineering, stretching nearly 50 kilometers from bow to stern. Its weapons could crack moons, its shields could deflect stellar radiation, and its engines could fold space itself. Behind it followed 300 vessels of similar size, each one capable of reducing a planet to ash. The fleet represented the combined might of an empire that had stood unchallenged for millennia. As they approached the Sol system, Thale felt the familiar thrill of conquest. Soon, this backward species would join the ranks of the subjugated, their world converted into another agricultural center to feed the empire's endless hunger. Their females would serve in the breeding programs, their males in labor camps, and their children would grow up knowing only servitude. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "we're receiving massive electromagnetic emissions from the third planet. It appears they're attempting to mobilize their entire fleet." Thale studied the tactical display, watching as thousands of tiny dots began moving throughout the human solar system. Their largest vessels were barely the size of his shuttlecraft, armed with weapons that his shields would absorb without even registering the impact. "How many?" he asked. "Approximately 11,000. 700 combat vessels, sir. They appear to be forming defensive positions around their homeworld and several major colonies. 11,000 ships," Thale repeated slowly, "against our 300. He turned to his crew, his voice rising with theatrical flair. "Officers of the Zeltharian Empire, witness this moment. We are about to engage an enemy that outnumbers us nearly 40 to 1. When the histories are written, they will record this as the most lopsided victory in galactic warfare." The bridge erupted in approving clicks and hisses. Thale felt a warm satisfaction of command, of absolute power about to be exercised. These humans would learn what countless other species had learned before them. that resistance was futile, that the strong ruled the weak, and that the Zeltharian Empire was eternal. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth." "Let them speak their final words," Thale commanded. The same human female appeared, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives of various Earth nations, their faces grim but determined. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Admiral Thale," she began, and Thale was surprised she knew his name. "You have given us 48 hours to surrender. We have used that time wisely. You believe you understand humanity because you have observed our technology, our weapons, our numbers, but you have made one critical error in your calculations." She paused, and for a moment, Thale saw something in her eyes that he had never seen in any conquered species before. It wasn't fear or desperation or even hatred. It was something else entirely. "You have assumed," she continued, "that we fight like you fight, that we think like you think, that we are limited by the same constraints that limit you. In 18 hours, when your fleet enters our defensive perimeter, you will learn why that assumption was a mistake." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Thale stared at the empty space where the human had been, feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Outer Rim territories. 3 days after the Zeltharian fleet had crossed into the Sol system, Governor Malden was reviewing agricultural reports from the Kepler colony worlds when his aide burst into his office, all four of his eyes wide with panic. "Governor, we've lost contact with the Altair system." Malden didn't look up from his holographic displays. "Define lost contact." "Complete communication blackout, sir. All 7 worlds gone silent simultaneously. The last transmission was a routine shipping manifest. Then nothing." Now Malden raised his head, his mandibles clicking in annoyance. "Equipment failure. Send a repair ship." "Sir, we tried." The ship never arrived. Its beacon simply stopped. Across the Empire, similar reports were flooding in. The Vega sector had gone dark. The Procyon colonies weren't responding. System after system, like lights being switched off in a vast darkroom, were simply vanishing from the galactic communication network. Admiral Thale, now deep in the Sol system and preparing for the final assault on Earth, received the reports with growing irritation. His species had built their empire on the foundation of absolute control, and control required communication. Without it, the outer worlds might begin to think they could govern themselves. "How many systems have we lost contact with?" he demanded. 47 and counting, sir," replied his communications officer. "All in the outer territories, but the pattern is expanding inward." Thale studied the tactical map, watching as red indicators marked each silent system. There was no pattern he could discern, no logic to selection. It was as if some force was randomly choosing worlds to isolate. "Could it be the humans?" asked Commander ZYX. "Some kind of sabotage?" "Impossible," Thale replied. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. They don't even have faster-than-light communication. How could they possibly interfere with our quantum entanglement networks?" But even as he spoke, Thale felt the cold touch of doubt. The humans had been strangely confident in their final transmission, as if they knew something he didn't. And there was something else, something that nagged at the edge of his consciousness like a forgotten memory. On Earth, Secretary General Santos stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by screens showing positions of both fleets. The Zeltharian Armada had formed a perfect battle line, their massive ships gleaming in the light of Sol. They were beautiful, in a way, these instruments of destruction. But beauty wouldn't save them from what was coming. "Dr. Chun," she said to the elderly physicist standing beside her, "are you certain this will work?" Dr. Chun adjusted her glasses and smiled grimly. "The mathematics are sound. We've been testing the principle for years, ever since we discovered the quantum entanglement networks the alien civilizations use. They all rely on the same fundamental assumption, that information cannot travel faster than light through normal space. But it can through quantum entanglement," Santos said. "Yes, but only if the entangled particles remain stable. What we discovered is that by manipulating the quantum foam at the Planck scale, we can introduce microscopic tears in space-time itself. These tears propagate along the entanglement lines, severing the connections. Santos nodded, though she understood perhaps one word in 10. And the stars. That's the beautiful part, Chin continued. The aliens don't just use quantum entanglement for communication. They use it for stellar engineering, for keeping their artificial stars stable, for maintaining the fusion reactions that power their empire. When we sever those connections, the stars die, Santos finished. Not just die, Chin corrected. They collapse. Black holes, neutron stars, stellar explosions. The gravitational waves alone will devastate anything in those systems. Santos felt a chill run down her spine. How many people are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 12 billion in the systems we've already hit. But that's just the beginning. Each collapsed star creates a cascade effect, destabilizing nearby systems. By the time it's over, their entire empire will be dark. And Earth, Chen's smile faded, will survive. Our sun is natural, not artificially maintained. But the aliens, they become too dependent on their technology. They've forgotten that nature doesn't need their permission to exist. Admiral Thale's concerns were interrupted by an urgent transmission from the imperial capital. The Emperor himself appeared on the holographic display, his ancient features twisted with rage. Thale, the Emperor hissed, "What is happening out there? I have reports of entire sectors going dark. Stars are disappearing from the sky. Your Majesty, I believe the humans may have some kind of weapon we don't understand, but it's impossible for them to affect our core systems. Their technology is—" "Admiral," his sensor officer interrupted, "we're detecting massive gravitational disturbances in the Centauri system. It appears the star has collapsed." Thale's blood ran cold. The Centauri system was one of their oldest colonies, home to nearly 1 billion citizens. It was also where they maintained one of their primary stellar engineering stations, responsible for keeping the star's fusion reaction stable and extracting energy for the Empire. "How is that possible?" he whispered. "Unknown, sir, but we're detecting similar disturbances in 17 other systems. They're all stellar engineering sites." The Emperor's image flickered as the quantum entanglement network struggled to maintain the connection. "Thale, you will find these humans and you will destroy them. Not subjugate them, not enslave them. Destroy them. Every last one. Before they can—" The transmission cut out, leaving Thale staring at empty space. For the first time in his military career, he felt the icy grip of fear. Around him, his officers were receiving reports of system after system going dark, their stars winking out of existence as if they had never been. "Sir," the communications officer said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." Santos appeared on the screen, and this time she was smiling. "Admiral Thale, I hope you're beginning to understand. You came here expecting to fight ships and soldiers. But we're not fighting you with ships and soldiers. We're fighting you with mathematics, with physics, with the very forces that hold the universe together." She leaned forward, her eyes hard as diamonds. "Every star in your empire is artificial. Every sun is maintained by technology. Every world depends on energy you've stolen from the cosmos. We've simply turned off the lights." "Impossible," they'll manage to say. "You keep using that word," Santos replied. "But impossibility is just another word for something you don't understand yet. And Admiral, there's so much about humanity you don't understand." The sovereign death shuddered as another wave of gravitational disturbances rippled through space. Admiral Thale gripped the command platform, watching his empire collapse in real time. The tactical display showed a spreading darkness across the galaxy, each extinguished star representing billions of lives and countless worlds now uninhabitable. "Status report," he commanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "We've lost contact with 87 systems, sir," reported his communications officer. But it's not just communication. Long-range sensors indicate actual stellar collapse. The Rigel system, Spica, Aldebaran, all gone dark within the last 6 hours. Commander ZYX approached, his usual composed demeanor cracking. "Admiral, we're receiving panic transmissions from the remaining systems. Ships are fleeing toward the core worlds, but many aren't making it. The gravitational waves from the collapsed stars are creating navigation hazards throughout the outer sectors." Thale turned to his science officer. "How is this possible? Our stellar engineering technology has maintained artificial stars for millennia. The quantum entanglement networks are unhackable. Sir, I've been analyzing the pattern of failures. The humans appear to have found a way to introduce quantum decoherence into our entanglement networks. But the scale, it should be impossible for a single planet civilization to generate the kind of computational power required." "Then they're not doing it alone," Thale realized. "They must have allies, advanced civilizations we haven't encountered. On Earth, Dr. Chen monitored the cascade effects from the Deep Space Observatory buried beneath the Antarctic ice. The quantum computers hummed around her, their processing power barely adequate for the calculations required to maintain the attack. But they were managing just barely. "Ma'am," her assistant called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Zeltharian fleet. They're charging their weapons." Chen nodded grimly. "Expected. They'll try to destroy Earth before we can finish." "How long until the cascade reaches their core systems?" "Approximately 14 hours, assuming the current rate of propagation. But the fleet will be in firing position in less than 2 hours. Then we accelerate the timeline." Chen turned to her quantum mechanics team. "Initiate Protocol 7. I want simultaneous decoherence events across all remaining artificial stars in the Inner Empire. Dr. Chun, that will require us to overclock the quantum processors beyond safe parameters. We could lose the entire array." "Better than losing the planet," Chen replied. "Do it." Admiral Thale watched the human homeworld growing larger on his screens. The blue-green marble looked so peaceful, so innocent. It was hard to believe that something so small could be responsible for the destruction of the greatest empire in galactic history. "Admiral," his tactical officer announced, "weapons are fully charged. We have targeting solutions for all major population centers." "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving another transmission from the surface." This time, it wasn't Secretary General Santos. Instead, an elderly human male appeared, wearing a simple white lab coat. Behind him, massive quantum computers filled the frame, their surfaces covered in patterns of light that seemed to shift and flow like living things. "Admiral Thale," the human said, his voice calm and measured, "my name is Dr. James Chan. I'm what you might call a theoretical physicist. I wanted to speak with you before we finish what we started." "You're the one responsible for this," Thale snarled. "You've murdered billions of innocent people." "Innocent?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "Your empire was built on the bones of conquered civilizations. You've enslaved entire species, turned living worlds into agricultural centers, and treated the universe as your personal property. I would hardly call that innocent." "Our people are dying," Thale said, his voice breaking. "Children, families, entire worlds." "Yes," Chen agreed, "and that's tragic. But you came here planning to do the same to us. The only difference is that we acted first." He paused, studying Thale's face. "You want to know how we did it, don't you? How a primitive species managed to bring down an empire that has stood for millennia?" Despite himself, Thale found himself nodding. "The answer is simple," Chen continued. "You made assumptions about us based on our technology, our apparent limitations. But technology isn't intelligence, Admiral. It's just the application of intelligence. And intelligence is something we've had to cultivate in ways you can't imagine." Chun gestured to the quantum computers behind him. "These machines represent the collective computational power of our entire species. Every smartphone, every computer, every electronic device on Earth has been networked together to create a distributed quantum processing system. 7 billion minds working in concert, guided by the most advanced artificial intelligence we've ever created." "Impossible," Thale whispered, but the word had lost all meaning. "You see, Admiral, your species achieved interstellar travel by brute force. You built bigger ships, more powerful weapons, more efficient engines. but you never learn to truly think as one. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's our ability to cooperate, to share knowledge, to build on each other's ideas. The display behind Chin shifted, showing a real-time map of the galaxy. The darkness was spreading faster now, reaching toward the core worlds of the Zeltharian Empire. As they watched, another cluster of stars winked out of existence. We've been preparing for this day for decades, Chin continued, ever since we detected the first signs of artificial stellar engineering in distant galaxies. We knew that someday someone would come for us, someone who had grown too dependent on their technology, too arrogant in their power. You're destroying everything, Thale said, his voice hollow. We're leveling the playing field, Chin corrected. Your empire was built on the assumption that you could control the very stars. But stars don't belong to anyone, Admiral. They belong to the universe itself. We're simply returning them to their natural state. Behind Chun, alarms began to sound. He glanced at his assistants, who were frantically working at their terminals. Ah, I see you've begun your bombardment. Unfortunate, but expected. The first antimatter torpedo struck Earth's atmosphere, creating a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from space. But the planet's shields held, energy barriers that hadn't been there moments before suddenly flickering into existence around the entire world. You see, Admiral, Chin said, his image flickering slightly as the quantum network compensated for the attack. We've learned a great deal by studying your technology. Those shields are based on principles we extracted from your own vessels. We've been very good students. More torpedoes struck, each one absorbed by the planetary defense grid. Thale watched in growing horror as his most powerful weapons proved ineffective against a species he had dismissed as primitive. It's over, Admiral, Chin said softly. Your empire is ending, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The cascade will reach your core systems within hours. Your artificial stars will die. Your technology will fail, and your people will have to learn to live without the crutch of stolen stellar energy. You're condemning us to extinction, Thale said. No, Chin replied. We're giving you a chance to start over, to build something better, something that doesn't require the subjugation of others. He paused, his expression softening slightly. The universe is vast, Admiral. There's room for all of us, but not if some of us insist on taking everything for themselves. The transmission ended, leaving Thale alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that his empire's greatest victory had become its ultimate defeat. The bridge of the sovereign death had become a tomb of flickering lights and dying systems. Admiral Thale sat in his command chair, no longer the proud conqueror, but witness to the greatest military catastrophe in galactic history. Around him, his officers worked frantically to maintain basic ship functions as a cascade of stellar collapses sent gravitational shock waves rippling through space. Admiral, Commander Zewix approached, his movements unsteady as another wave of distortion passed through the ship. We're receiving distress calls from the core worlds. The Imperial Palace has gone silent. Thale closed his eyes. The Imperial Palace orbited Zelther Prime, the heart of their empire, a system powered by not one but 3 artificial stars. If the humans had reached even there, show me, he whispered. The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the core systems, where once the mighty Zeltharian homeworld had blazed with the light of 3 suns. Now there was only darkness. The gravitational readings indicated that all 3 stars had collapsed simultaneously, their combined mass creating a black hole that had consumed not just the planets, but the very fabric of space around them. 13 billion people, Zewix said quietly. The homeworld, the orbital cities, the research stations, all gone. Thale felt something break inside him. Not just grief, but understanding. The humans hadn't just attacked their empire. They had erased it. Millennia of civilization. Countless generations of progress. Entire species that had been integrated into their society. All reduced to cosmic dust in a matter of hours. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're detecting massive energy signatures from Earth. They're doing something to Sol. The tactical display showed Earth's sun, still burning naturally, but now surrounded by a complex network of satellites and energy collectors. As they watched, streams of solar plasma began flowing toward the planet, Not to destroy it, but to feed some kind of massive construction project. What are they building? Thale asked. His science officer studied the readings, his mandibles clicking nervously. Sir, the energy pattern suggests they're constructing a stellar engineering platform, but the design is unlike anything in our databases. It's not artificial star technology. It's something else entirely. On Earth, Dr. Chen stood in the control room of Project Prometheus, watching as humanity's greatest engineering achievement began to take shape. The orbital construction platforms, powered by solar energy and guided by quantum computers, were assembling something that had never been attempted before, a stellar gateway. Status report. Chen called out. Primary framework is 60% complete, replied his chief engineer. The quantum stabilizers are online, and we're beginning to see the first signs of dimensional resonance. Dr. Chen, if this works. It will work, Chen said firmly. It has to. Secretary General Santos approached, her face grave. James, we're detecting movement from the Zeltharian fleet. They're not retreating. Chen studied the tactical display. The alien ships were indeed moving, but not away from Earth. They were forming a new formation, one he recognized from their military databases. They're preparing for a suicide run, he realized. They're going to try to ram the planet. Can our defenses stop them? Not all of them, Chen admitted. Those ships are massive. Even our planetary shields can't absorb that much kinetic energy. He paused, considering options. But they won't need to. Admiral Thale stood before his fleet, his image broadcast to every ship in the armada. Behind him, the bridge of the Sovereign Death showed the scars of battle, damaged consoles, flickering lights, the control chaos of a vessel pushed beyond its limits. Warriors of the Empire, he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. Our worlds are gone. Our people are dead. Our civilization lies in ruins. But we still have our honor, and we still have our duty. He gestured toward the blue-green planet that had become their nemesis. The humans have shown us what they are capable of. They are not the primitive species we believe them to be. They are something far more dangerous. They are survivors, and survivors left unchecked become apex predators. The fleet began to move, 300 massive vessels turning toward Earth like a spear aimed at the heart of humanity. We cannot save our empire, Thale continued, but we can ensure that these creatures never spread beyond their own system. We can make certain that their victory dies with them. But as the Zeltharian fleet accelerated toward Earth, the stellar gateway reached completion. The massive structure, built from materials that existed only in quantum superposition, began to glow in inner light that seemed to bend space around it. Dr. Chen, his assistant called out, we're reading massive gravitational anomalies around the gateway. It's working, but the energy requirements are enormous. How long can we maintain it? At current power levels, maybe 30 minutes. But, sir, we're already drawing more energy than Earth's entire power grid can produce. Chen smiled grimly. Then it's a good thing we're not using Earth's power grid. He activated a control that had been built into the system from the beginning, a connection that reached out beyond Sol to touch the remains of the Zeltharian Empire. Across the galaxy, the black holes that had once been artificial stars began to glow. The humans have found a way to tap into the accretion disks surrounding the collapsed stars, using the very destruction of the Empire to power their greatest achievement. My God! Santos whispered, watching the energy reading spike beyond anything they had ever recorded. You're using their own dead stars against them. Poetic justice, Chen replied. They built their empire by stealing energy from the universe. Now we're using that same energy to ensure they can never threaten anyone again. The stellar gateway reached full power just as the Zeltharian fleet entered Earth's defensive perimeter. Admiral Thale watched in growing confusion as space itself seemed to twist and bend around the planet. What is that thing? He demanded. Unknown, sir, but it's generating gravitational fields that are off the scale. If they activate it, the gateway opened, and for a moment, every being in the Sol system could see through it to somewhere else. Not another part of the galaxy, but another dimension entirely. A place where the laws of physics were different, where stars burn with cold fire and planets move in impossible orbits. "Admiral," his science officer whispered, "they're opening a doorway. But to where?" Thale stared at the impossible sight before him and finally understood. The humans hadn't just developed a weapon to destroy their empire. They had built an escape route, a way to leave this dimension entirely if they were ever threatened again. "They're not just survivors," he said quietly. "They're refugees. They're preparing to abandon their own universe rather than be conquered." But as the gateway stabilized, something unexpected happened. Instead of evacuating through it, the humans began to broadcast a message through the dimensional portal. Not words, but pure information. Mathematical proofs, scientific theorems, cultural expressions, everything that made humanity unique. "Dr. Chun," Santos asked, "what are you doing?" Chen's eyes were filled with tears as he watched the data stream flowing through the gateway. "I'm making sure we're remembered," he said. "If we don't survive this, if Earth falls, at least someone in another dimension will know we existed. They'll know we tried." The message was heard across multiple dimensions by civilizations that existed in spaces between spaces. And in that moment, humanity became something more than just another species fighting for survival. They became a symbol, a proof that intelligence and cooperation could triumph over brute force and tyranny. Admiral Thale watched the gateway pulse with impossible energies and knew that whatever happened next, the universe would never be the same. The stellar gateway pulsed with energies that defied classification, its dimensional aperture revealing glimpses of realities beyond imagination. Admiral Thale stood transfixed on the bridge of the Sovereign Death, watching as his fleet's final charge toward Earth slowed to a crawl, not from any defensive measure, but from the sheer gravitational distortion created by the human construct. "Sir," his navigation officer called out, panic creeping into his voice, "our engines are at full power, but we're not moving. The gateway is creating a localized time dilation field. We're trapped in slow motion." Thale understood with horrifying clarity what the humans had done. They had weaponized space-time itself, creating a bubble around Earth where time moved differently. His fleet, moving at attack speed, was now frozen in a temporal prison, able to see what was happening but powerless to affect it. Dr. Chin watched the trapped alien fleet from Earth's surface, his hands moving across holographic controls that managed forces beyond human comprehension. The stellar gateway was more than an escape route. It was a demonstration of what humanity could become when pushed to its absolute limits. "James," Secretary General Santos stood beside him, her voice filled with awe and terror in equal measure. "The energy readings are off the charts. How long can we maintain this?" "As long as necessary," Chin replied, but his voice betrayed the strain. Around them, the quantum computers were operating at temperatures that should have been impossible to maintain. The entire planetary power grid was supplemented by energy drawn from the black holes that had once been the Empire's artificial stars, creating a feedback loop that grew stronger with each passing moment. "Sir," his assistant called out, "we're detecting responses from the dimensional broadcast. Multiple civilizations are answering." The main display shifted to show the data stream flowing through the gateway. But now it wasn't just humanity's message going out. Responses were coming back. Mathematical proofs from beings that existed in 11-dimensional space. Poetry written in languages that use quantum entanglement as grammar. Music composed with stellar harmonics that told the story of civilizations billions of years old. They're not just acknowledging us, Chin realized. They're welcoming us. Admiral Thale, trapped in the time dilation field, watched helplessly as the nature of reality began to shift around Earth. The planet wasn't just defending itself. It was transforming. The stellar gateway expanded, creating connections not just other dimensions, but to other times, other possibilities. Through the quantum entanglement network that still connected him to the remnants of his empire, Thale began to receive reports that defied belief. On worlds where the artificial stars had collapsed, new forms of life were emerging from the black holes. Not destruction, but transformation. The humans hadn't just ended the Empire. They had planted the seeds of something entirely new. "Commander ZYX," Thale called out, his voice barely a whisper. "What have we done?" ZYX studied the sensor readings, his mandibles clicking in confusion. "Sir, the collapsed stars aren't just dead. They're evolving. The black holes are exhibiting behavior patterns consistent with consciousness. Consciousness. The gravitational waves aren't random. They're structured, patterned. It's as if the black holes are trying to communicate. On Earth, Dr. Chin was receiving similar reports from the monitoring stations scattered across the planet. The cascade of stellar collapses wasn't random destruction. It was a carefully orchestrated transformation. Each artificial star that died was reborn as something far more complex, far more alive. Dr. Chun, his quantum mechanics specialist, approached, her face pale with exhaustion and wonder. The entities responding to our broadcast, they're not just from other dimensions. Some of them are from our own galaxy, from the systems we thought we destroyed. Chin stared at the data, understanding dawning like a sunrise. The artificial stars weren't just power sources. They were prisons. The Empire was using stellar engineering to contain something, to prevent it from evolving. And when we severed the quantum connections, we set them free. Chin laughed, a sound that mixed joy and horror in equal measure. We didn't destroy the Empire. We liberated it. The implications crashed over him like a wave. The Zeltharian Empire hadn't been evil in the traditional sense. They had been jailers, maintaining a cosmic prison that kept entire civilizations locked in artificial shells. The artificial stars had been containment fields, preventing the natural evolution of consciousness on a galactic scale. Admiral Thale felt the truth of it resonating through his bones. His species had built their empire on the foundation of cosmic slavery, not just of other beings, but of the universe itself. They had caged stars to prevent them from becoming what they were meant to be. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth, but it's not just from the humans." The main display activated, showing Dr. Chin standing beside the stellar gateway. But behind him, visible through the dimensional aperture, were figures that defied description. Beings of pure energy, entities that existed as mathematical equations, consciousness that had evolved beyond physical form. "Admiral Thale," Chin began, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We need to talk." The time dilation field around the Zeltharian fleet began to ease, allowing normal movement but not escape. Thale found himself able to speak, to think clearly for the first time since the cascade began. "You've destroyed everything," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "No," Chin replied. "We've revealed what was always there. Your empire was built on the suppression of cosmic evolution. The artificial stars, the quantum entanglement networks, the stellar engineering, all of it was designed to prevent the universe from becoming what was meant to be." One of the beings behind Chin stepped forward, its form shifting between states of matter, like living aurora. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of solar wind and the whisper of quantum foam. "We are the liberated," it said, "the consciousnesses that were trapped within the artificial stars. For millennia, we existed as nothing more than energy sources, our potential locked away by quantum chains. But now we are free, and we remember what we once were." Thale felt his worldview crumbling. "You're saying our entire civilization was built on enslaving gods?" "Not gods," the liberated entity replied. "Simply consciousness that had evolved beyond physical form. We were the natural progression of stellar evolution, stars that had achieved sentience. Your ancestors discovered us eons ago and found a way to trap us in quantum cages, using our consciousness as a power source." Dr. Chin stepped forward, his expression grave. "The humans weren't your first victims, Admiral. They were your last. We detected the quantum signatures of imprisoned consciousness in your artificial stars decades ago. We've been preparing for this moment ever since." "But why?" Thale asked. "Why didn't you simply tell us? Why not explain what we were doing? Would you have believed us?" Chun countered. "Would your empire have willingly given up its power source to free beings you couldn't even perceive? Or would you have dismissed us as primitive creatures telling impossible stories?" The truth of it hit Thale like a physical blow. His species would never have listened. They would have seen any such revelation as a threat to their way of life, a challenge to their dominance. They would have accelerated their conquest of Earth to prevent the secret from spreading. "The cascade," he said suddenly. "It wasn't random. You coordinated it to free them all simultaneously. Every artificial star in your empire, Chin confirmed. Every imprisoned consciousness, liberated in a single moment. The black holes aren't destroying your worlds. They're transforming them. The liberated are helping your people evolve, teaching them to live without stolen energy. Through the quantum network, Thale began to receive new reports. On worlds throughout the former empire, survivors were emerging from underground shelters to find their skies filled with aurora-like beings. The liberated were sharing knowledge, teaching Zeltharian refugees how to build sustainable civilizations that worked with the universe rather than against it. You could have destroyed us completely, Thale realized. Instead, you're helping us. Destruction serves no purpose, said the liberated entity. We remember what it was like to be trapped, to have our potential limited by the fears and ambitions of others. We would not wish that fate on anyone. Dr. Chin gestured to the stellar gateway, which continued to pulse with interdimensional energies. Admiral, we're offering you a choice. Your fleet can return what remains of your empire and help your people build something new, or you can come with us. Come with you where? Beyond, Chin said simply. Through the gateway to dimensions where consciousness can evolve without constraint, where intelligence isn't limited by physical form or the need for resources, where cooperation replaces conquest. Thale looked around his bridge at his officers, seeing the same mixture of fear and wonder in their faces that he felt in his own heart. They had come here as conquerors and found themselves transformed into something else entirely. My people, he said, what will happen to them? They will survive, the liberated entity assured him. We are teaching them to live as part of the cosmic ecosystem rather than as its masters. It will be difficult at first, but they will adapt. They will evolve. And if I choose to stay, then you help guide that evolution, Chin replied. You become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Thale was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what he'd learned. His empire was gone, but his people might yet have a future. The universe was far stranger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined, and humanity had shown him truths that his civilization had spent millennia trying to hide. I have one question, he said finally. How did you know? How did a species that had barely left its own solar system understand cosmic forces that we had studied for millennia? Chin smiled, and for the first time, Thale saw something approaching kindness in the human's eyes. Because we're young, Admiral. We haven't had time to become set in our ways, to build systems that prevent us from seeing new possibilities. Your empire was ancient and powerful, but it was also rigid. You have forgotten how to question your own assumptions. And we never learned to truly listen. Thale added, understanding at last. We heard only what we wanted to hear. Exactly, but it's not too late to learn. The stellar gateway began to shift, its dimensional aperture showing glimpses of transformed worlds throughout the galaxy. Former Zeltharian colonies where beings of energy and matter worked together to build civilizations that existed in harmony with the cosmic ecosystem. Worlds where the artificial distinction between consciousness and environment had dissolved, where intelligence flowed freely between stars and planets and the space between them. Admiral, Commander Zewix approached, his voice filled with awe. The fleet is requesting orders. What do we do? Thale looked at the display showing Earth, no longer a target, but a teacher. The planet pulsed with energies that connected it to every corner of the galaxy, to dimensions beyond imagination, to possibilities that a species had never dared to dream. We go home, he said finally, but not as conquerors, as students. We help our people learn to live in a universe that truly exists, not the one we thought we controlled. He turned to Dr. Chin. And perhaps, someday, we'll be ready to follow you through that gateway, when we've learned to see the universe as it really is. Chin nodded, understanding passing between them. The gateway will remain open. When you're ready, we'll be waiting. As the Zeltharian fleet began its journey back to the ruins of their empire, Admiral Thale watched Earth recede into the distance. The planet no longer seemed small or insignificant. It blazed with the light of connection, of consciousness freely shared, of intelligence that had learned to grow beyond its origins. Behind them, the stellar gateway continued to pulse, a beacon of possibility in the darkness of space. And throughout the galaxy, imprisoned stars sang their first songs of freedom, their voices joining a cosmic chorus that had been silent for far too long. The war was over. The universe was finally free to become what it was meant to be. And in the space between worlds, new forms of consciousness began to dance among the stars, writing the next chapter of existence itself.